All right, welcome everyone. Today, we are going to completely dismantle everything you thought you knew about Britain. Seriously, we're diving into a country that is sitting right under the nose of millions of travelers, yet it remains fiercely independent and honestly just full of surprises. We're exploring the incredible layers of Wales.
Okay, let's dive right into this. You haven't really seen Britain until you've seen Wales. Now, I love this because it perfectly captures where we're starting today. When people skip this small country, and a lot do, they aren't just missing out on a few extra tourist sites. They're missing hidden, towering mountains, this incredibly ancient, vibrant culture, and a density of history that most travelers just completely overlook. If you really want to understand the true fabric of the United Kingdom, skipping Wales leaves a massive piece of the puzzle entirely missing.
So to really grasp what makes Wales so unique, we've got to look at the rule of contrast. Physically speaking, Wales is pretty small. It's just over 8,000 square miles, or about 21,000 square kilometers. But its historical footprint? It is absolutely massive. It carries this huge national character and a staggering density of fortresses that, frankly, wildly punches above its weight. I mean, think about it. There are over 600 recorded castle sites squeezed into this tiny space. You quickly realize that in Wales, history isn't just an attraction, It's literally the landscape itself.
Moving into our first section, not just a corner, language, legend, and culture.
Right off the bat, we need to completely forget the idea that Wales is just some quiet corner of England. It is fiercely independent, and a massive part of that independence is Cymraeg, the Welsh language. This is actually one of Europe's oldest living Celtic languages. And the amazing thing here, this ancient language isn't locked away in some dusty museum. Not at all. It's a vibrant, living part of everyday life. You'll see it on road signs everywhere. You hear it in schoolyards, in local chats at the pub, and in simple, welcoming words like croeso, which means welcome. It's a daily spoken declaration of their identity.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how deeply protective Wales is of its sense of self. Just look at these cultural anchors. You've got the Eisteddfod, which is this massive festival where spoken word poetry, music, and storytelling are treated with absolute national importance. Then you have the wonderfully quirky Mari Lwyd. This is a winter tradition involving a decorated horse skull and rhyming contests at people's front doors just to win food and drink. I mean, how cool is that? Throw in the leek, the daffodil for St. David's Day, and of course that brilliantly defiant red dragon flag, and you see a culture that has actively, fiercely defended its stories for centuries.
All right, moving on to section 2, a landscape of extremes.
So this unforgiving but truly stunning environment physically tested the people living there. And in doing so, it forged an intense, loyal community. The variety packed into this small country is just mind-blowing. Up in the north, you have the sharp glacial ridges and slate quarries of Snowdonia, or Eryri, with Mount Snowdon peaking at 1,085 meters. But then you move inland and you find the Elon Valley. This is an incredible feat of human engineering from the 1890s, where these vast stone dams were built just to send water 110 kilometers away to Birmingham. And if you head over to the border, you find Hay-on-Wye. It's this eccentric literary town packed with secondhand books that famously and hilariously declared itself an independent kingdom back in 1977 under Richard Booth. So it's a geography that ranges from harsh natural beauty to sheer human ingenuity and, well, delightful rebellion.
But how did people actually survive in this beautiful, demanding terrain? Well, they worked inside the very hills themselves. The dangerous, highly physical labor of underground coal miners and steep-slope sheep farmers fueled this incredibly intense emotional pride. That's exactly where the famous Welsh male voice choirs and those famously passionate rugby crowds come from. And this grueling hard work was sustained by simple, locally tied foods. Things like coal, which is a warming lamb stew, warm Welsh cakes, bar brith, a delicious tea-soaked fruit loaf, and laverbread, which is actually made directly from coastal seaweed. Now, what's really interesting here is how the Welsh take this raw, challenging landscape and weave it into deeply emotional stories of loyalty and grief. Let's take the beautiful, peaceful mountain village of Bedgelert, for example. Why on earth is it famous for just one single grave? Any guesses? Well, it all comes down to a tragic, mythic twist. As the legend goes, Prince Llewellyn returned from a hunting trip to find his baby missing, the cradle overturned, and his loyal dog Gellert just covered in blood. Thinking the dog had killed his child, he struck the dog down, only to then hear his baby crying safely nearby, right next to a dead wolf that Gellert had actually fought off to protect the child.
Now, full disclosure, historians believe this tale was popularized much later just to attract visitors, but honestly, it doesn't even matter. It perfectly captures that classic Welsh interplay of landscape, emotion, and unforgettable storytelling.
And speaking of stories carved into the environment, how about 307 meters of pure ambition? That is the length of the Podsilte Aqueduct. Completed back in 1805 by engineers Thomas Telford and William Jessup, this thing is a massive cast-iron canal trough sitting 38 meters high up in the air. Just picture it. Narrow boats, once pulled by horses, literally floating across the sky to transport coal and iron during the industrial age. It is an absolute marvel of engineering.
Which brings us to Section 3, Castles, Symbols of Power.
From engineering in the sky, we're moving to history carved in stone. But listen, we aren't looking at romantic ruins here. These were brutal military machines. This timeline is practically a blueprint of power in Britain. It starts 2,000 years ago with Roman coastal forts, like in Cardiff. Then in the late 13th century, King Edward I of England builds these massive fortresses, places like Caernarfon, Harlech, and Conway, specifically to subjugate the Welsh. Fast forward to 1457, and Henry Tudor, the future king, Henry VII, is born at Pembroke Castle, tying Wales directly to the birth of the entire Tudor dynasty. And finally, by the 19th century, you have the wealthy elite swooping in to transform these ancient sites into lavish, theatrical Gothic revivals.
The contrast between these eras is just staggering. On one hand, you have the brutal reality of Caernarfon Castle, built in 1283. Its massive angular towers were designed purely to dominate and send a clear message of fear. In fact, it's a legacy of power so strong that Prince Charles was formally invested there in 1969. On the other hand, you have Castell Coch, the Red Castle. It looks straight out of a fairy tale, right? But it's actually a 19th century romanticized rebuild by a wealthy marquis and the architect William Burgess. So King Edward I used architecture as a weapon, while later centuries basically used it as a fantasy.
And the defensive engineering of those 13th century castles is nothing short of staggering. Conway Castle wasn't just a building. It featured 1.3 kilometers of town walls and 20 towers, locking in a completely controlled English settlement. Then there's Harlech Castle. Built on a rocky spur, it famously endured a massive siege from 1461 to 1468 during the Wars of the Roses. That's 7 years. It was an event so defined by isolation and loyalty that it inspired the famous song Men of Harlech. And Pembroke Castle, it integrated a massive 23-meter round keep with a natural limestone cave, called Wogan Cavern, right into its defenses. These weren't just homes. They were the ultimate machines of survival.
Let's move into our final layer, Section 4, the wild Welsh coast.
Now let's leave the stone fortresses behind for a bit and head to a rugged coastal edge that's ruled not by kings, but by weather, tides, and hidden natural wonders. 1,400 kilometers. That is roughly 870 miles of coastline wrapping around this small country. The sheer scale and drama of it is incredible. It houses the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park, which, by the way, is the only national park in the UK created primarily for its coastline, complete with a stunning 299-kilometer cliffside walking path.
But make no mistake, this coast is as dangerous as it is beautiful. It is completely dictated by harsh Atlantic weather and strict timing of the tides. Take the South Stack Lighthouse, for instance. It was lit in 1809, built down hundreds of steep cliff steps just to warn ships away from deadly rocks. Or look at the Llyn Peninsula, a 48-kilometer stretch of strong Welsh-speaking communities and ancient pilgrim routes to Bardsey Island. And Rossley Bay? It's almost 3 miles of sand that looks so peaceful, but it actually hides the 1887 Helvetia shipwreck. Plus, it features Worm's Head, an island you can only reach when the tide allows it. If you miss the crossing, you are stranded. No way around it.
Let's move to how this builds perfectly on a recurring theme of myth versus reality. At Three Cliffs Bay, the ruins of Pennard Castle overlook the sand. Now, local legend insists the castle was ruined by angry fairies after the local lord offended them. The brutal reality? The harsh environment, shifting sand dunes, and relentless coastal erosion simply swallowed the human settlement whole. Here, the landscape itself is the ultimate conqueror.
So the crucial point here is that Wales' wildest edges are incredibly alive, often in ways you can't even immediately see. Take Skermer Island. By day, it's this bustling, adorable colony of puffins carrying sand eels in their beaks, with guillemots and razorbills crowding the cliff ledges and gray seals and dolphins swimming just off the shores. But at night, it completely transforms.
Tens of thousands of Manx shearwaters return from the sea under the cover of darkness, scrambling into underground burrows to avoid predators. It becomes this loud, hidden, working city of seabirds that most daytime visitors never even get to witness.
And as we pull all these threads together, I want you to think about Tinternappi. Founded in 1131 for Cistercian monks, this place was a working religious community for centuries before being abruptly dissolved by Henry VIII. Today, it stands as these beautiful, empty stone walls entirely open to the sky. It perfectly synthesizes everything we've talked about in this explainer today. In Wales, profound, breathtaking beauty is deeply, intrinsically intertwined with a history of struggle, resilience, and loss.
Which brings us to our final thought. If Wales is the layer of Britain that shapes its history, wildlife, and fortresses, can you ever truly understand Britain without it? I want to thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I really hope this journey through the incredible layers of Wales has sparked your curiosity and maybe even made you question your overall understanding of the UK. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.